Welcome to Let's Be Perfectly Queer,
a queer podcast creating space to talk about all things queer.
My name is Archie.
And I'm Katie.
And we are your hosts.
Questions of how you identify, seeking answers to clarify. Whether you're queen
or somewhere in between, let's be perfectly queer.
What's this episode about?
Today we're going to be talking about pronouns, gender binary, those kind of things. It's going to be a little bit of an introduction episode to it. I'm sure we're going to be talking about it many other episodes later on in the future, but this is just dipping your toe into what the introduction to is.
Great explanation. Before we start that though, right now in Sydney, well, maybe depending on when we're going to edit this. So in Sydney, in the month of February, there has been Sydney World Pride.
World Pride!
Yeah, so it began on the 17th of February and goes till the 5th of March.
Oh, that's a good amount of time.
It marks 17 days with over 300 events, and it is the largest LGBTQIA plus festival in the world. I actually didn't even know this thing existed. I'm going to be completely honest. I had no idea there was a World Pride. I think I've heard about it,
yeah,
but I wasn't really sure about what it was. I didn't realize it was like a festival with big things going on or anything like that.
Yeah, because we've both been to Mardi Gras, but I don't, and granted that was a very long time ago for myself, but I don't remember there being a huge amount around at the same time.
This has only been going around since July 2000 when it first began in Rome. After that was Jerusalem, London, Toronto, Madrid, New York, Copenhagen and Malmo. I'm not sure how to say that. And then now it's finally come to Sydney.
In Jerusalem.
Yeah, I was very surprised about that.
Jerusalem was before us.
Yeah, I think we beat out, I think Canada also wanted to hold it and then Sydney actually won it.
Okay, so I get you now. It's kind of like the Olympics in the fact that they put it in a different city every year.
Not every year. So it happens, I think it's every 2 to 4 years or something like that.
Like the Commonwealth Games.
Yes, something like that. You know, Commonwealth Games for the gays.
God, I would pay to watch that, by the way. Commonwealth Games for the gays.
Oh, yeah?
That'd be the best.
Maybe we found our calling. We need to start our own...
Gay discus. You can chuck a tit.
No. But it is the first time that this event has been hosted in the Southern Hemisphere. And World Pride is an event that promotes lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender and queer issues on an international level through parades, festivals and other cultural activities. I think it had its opening ceremony on the 24th of February, but the iconic Sydney Mardi Gras parade was held on the 25th, and then the closing Rainbow Republic will be held on the Sunday, 5th of March. And yeah, so that's what's happening in the world of Pride right now.
By the way, just a quick recap because we've just had Fringe and all of that's been finishing. I just want to say there were some awesome queer artists out there. We saw a lot of stuff and I just want to do a shout out to if any of the queer artists we saw are listening to us. Oh my goodness, you were brilliant and it was so lovely to see representation.
I was about to say the representation. Shows like Briefs, incredible. Love the Briefs team. Also Burlesque, they were great. I felt that they had more representation this time and I thought it was really good.
I love the themes of their acts. I really do because it's all about acceptance and it's about understanding that everyone's diverse and nobody's normal. Yeah, it was just, I loved it. I really loved it. And I enjoyed Annie Lennox. I thought that was really good. I really enjoyed so many parts to it. Such a great artist. Alrighty, so this episode we're talking about pronouns and gender binary. And there's going to be a lot of definitions to start off with. So first of all, just to define what gender binary is, it can be broken down into like two general categories. So the first being it's a classification system consisting of two genders, male and female. And secondly, it's a concept or belief that there are only two genders and that one sex or gender assigned at birth will align with the traditional social constructs of masculine and feminine identity, expression and sexuality. Yeah, I know.
That's very weird. Because when we talk about gender, especially as someone who is queer, you talk about how vast and complicated gender is, and then the definition is saying there's only two. When I feel like it's getting confused with sex, because there's more than that. Because then so if you've got male, female, and then you've got intersex. Yeah. Like when you're looking at sex, but gender is a construct.
Yeah, it totally is. And so breaking that down a little bit further, because I was also like, okay, this sits weird with me.
It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, so then I was like, okay, so what's the difference between sex and gender?
So yeah, sex as determined by
I'll get
birth.
into this.
Yeah.
Let's look at this. So looking at the classification, it says sex is to categorize the anatomical cataloging of an individual defined by their genitals or chromosomes. So gender may encompass this, but also relates to the associated social roles and self-identity. So in binary definitions, a person who is an XX chromosome is expected to develop female body and identify as a woman and act accordingly to woman's stereotypes. In the same way, a person who's born with XY chromosomes is expected to develop a male body and identify as a male and therefore act on male stereotypes. Now, we know that this is not true.
Yes.
You can look at any person out there and be like, you are more than just your genitals and your chromosomes.
In 2023, you'd hope that people believe that.
And also, it's totally negating the fact that there are all these people out there who are intersex.
Mm-hmm.
So looking at that, because I was like, well, this also doesn't sit right with me because there's a whole blank part, which is everybody who's in between. Because I don't know anybody who sits exactly in a male or exactly in a female stereotype. So intersex is a general term used for a variety of situations in which a person is born with reproductive or sexual anatomy that doesn't fit the two boxes of male, in quotations, or female, in quotations.
Yeah, I love that you're doing the quotation marks, but I'm the only one who can see you.
Yeah, I know. That's why I had to define it, because I'm like, little bunny ears. Nobody can see it. We don't have video cameras yet, thank goodness. I'm not wearing makeup. Not that you have to, but I'm not. Looking at stats then, because I was like, well, I wonder how many people potentially are intersex out there. And so it's a huge amount. It really is.
Isn't it as common as people with red hair or something like that?
Looking at the stats of how common being intersex is, in the USA, it's approximately 1 to 2% of the population are intersex. In Europe, it's 0.5% of the population. In Australia, it's 1.7%. In India, it's 2%. In Canada, it's 0.36%. This is only gathered from, of course, like majority of countries that actually track it. There's a whole heap of countries that don't track intersex births, including China.
That doesn't surprise me at all.
And we have to also acknowledge understanding the term intersex as terminology, because of course there's going to be a lot of different races and cultures under there that might actually define it as something else.
Yeah, use a different definition to define what intersex is.
Yeah, it makes me really sad that we're already identifying the people who sit outside these realms, and yet you're saying, oh, you have to sit in a definite like male or female stereotype.
Yeah, and then there's a lot of the issues, because I was listening to a couple of podcasts where intersex people had genital mutilation and they'd got rid of the wrong parts for who they really were.
Yeah.
And so the doctors made them be a specific gender that did not align with their brain at all. So there's, you can look into that as well. So how that's not fair when you're making them fit into a box that they don't fit into.
That's the next thing I was going to get into, is that in our hospitals, it was saying that if a baby had genitals that weren't specifically defined into what we would recognize as, again, male quotation, female quotation, genitals, then these surgeries would go ahead to try and correct them, even though there's nothing to correct. So granted, these days we're a lot better, and neither of us work in this kind of field. No. You would really hope that, and granted in reading this, it did say a little bit more, that there is a more of an understanding that if there's not a problem with your anatomy that's causing you to be unwell, then why change it? It's
an unnecessary medical procedure that should not be happening. If it's not causing the child any harm, why would you put a child under that stress?
And like you mentioned, how are you to know if you're choosing the right gender? How are you to know?
And it's like you're playing God, right? It comes up to the parents like, oh, we thought the child was going to be a boy, so get rid of the other parts because the child is a boy.
Yeah.
You're playing God in essence. You're playing with this child's life. And when I was listening to some podcasts, it really messed up some of the kids. And, so why would you put a kid under that unnecessary mental turmoil?
Yeah, totally. And for those who don't know a lot about anatomy, there's a huge distinction. So with babies, a lot of the time, and you might want to tune out for a couple of minutes if you don't want to listen to anatomy for a little bit. But when babies are born, their genitals tend to be like really large. And so it's quite sometimes hard to differentiate between a very large clitoris, or sometimes the baby will just have a very large clitoris, or like labial hood, or all that kind of clitoral hood, labia and all that kind of stuff. Some babies might have undescended testes, in which the testes are still up within your body and haven't actually come down, and it takes a longer period of time because you would have to do ultrasound and further scans to actually see that they are up there, because in essence, with a lot of our reproductive organs, they are very similar to each other in regards to the ovaries and the testes. You have two, I'm going to break it down really simply, but you've got two bally sacs that come together as one, and then like
and some are inside and some are outside.
And some people actually have a combination of both. And why are we to judge that is like something that's outside of the norm if like we said, up to 2% of us that are like actually documented are intersex. Like that's a huge population out there already. If you're looking at like what our gender binaries, like it just, even as this factor, it just doesn't seem to make sense. Maybe we're just all like, this is just dissolving gender binary in itself, which is what I think needs to happen.
I do get why sometimes you do have to have sex. It's for medical reasons and that kind of stuff. It makes it easier to put a label on sex. But then why, like, male, female, like birth certificates and stuff?
Sometimes it does, and sometimes it equates to like what specific levels of your blood levels. Like males generally have like higher hemoglobin levels than females do. If you're looking at, and sometimes that does relate, as well as if you're looking at general organs in itself. If you're looking at somebody who has like prostate cancer, if you've got a prostate, then it's something that you might need to be looking at as an enlarged organ if you've got other issues with it. So yeah, I do see how it feeds into it, definitely, as well as like your risks of certain diseases are higher. So it definitely is a factor in a way, but
I get why we have sex, but why do we still have gender when gender is something that has been constructed by society?
And so like I was looking at this and what the terminology for gender variance, or there's a lot of different terms for somebody who doesn't fit within the gender binary. I found like a whole heap of terms. So you've got like gender variance, gender nonconformity, gender fluidity, you've got agendered, androgynous, bigender, gender expansive. I thought that was quite cool. Like the universe. Differently gendered, makes sense. Gender creative, gender fluid, like I said, gender diverse, gender neutral, gender queer, non-binary. So are all things that come under the category. But if you look at the dictionary definition of a gender non-conforming or gender variant person, it's saying that the expression of an individual does not match the masculine or feminine gender norms. So a gender non-conforming person may be variant in their gender identity, being transgender, non-binary, or they can be considered as cisgender.
And cisgender is not a slur. I don't know why some people think it is.
Huh?
Yeah, there's been this thing on TikTok, good old TikTok, where some heterosexual people who are cisgender are getting quite upset at being called cisgender because they think it's a slur.
Why?
I don't know, but it's not a slur. It's just it's a label.
It's a label for somebody who's like sex is the same as how they identify. It's like, well, cisgender can be gender variant as well. If you think about it, a cisgender person might fit into gender nonconformity initially because in the world that we live in with our gender norms that we have in the terms, the roles, the behaviours and such.
I think it'd be very rare to find someone who says, yes, I'm 100% the female ideal of what society has made me to be, because there are some times when you want to, lay on the couch in your tracky dacks, covered in food and junk and stuff. And would society say that's female?
Yeah. Well, feminine.
Would society, say it's feminine?
No, it's because what has been defined as being feminine is like wearing dresses. Why is that feminine? Yeah. Can't anyone wear a dress?
But
why
also,
is a dress for a female? If
you're looking at Greek mythology, basically the toga was very feminine and everybody wore the same thing.
Yeah.
So then how do you define feminine and masculine in that kind of society?
Yeah. The Scottish people out there, they're out there wearing kilts.
I love seeing Scottish kilts. I just love them. I think they're great.
A kilt is in essence a skirt, but it's very purposeful because it worked for the environment that they were living in. They needed to wear kilts, but we don't look at that and be like, oh, that's feminine. If you said that was feminine to a Scottish man, you'd probably end up being punched. You'd probably end up being taken down. Yeah.
So it's funny, it's society have put the labels on the clothing, on the mannerisms, and have decided, yep, this is feminine, this is masculine. But if you look in so much of the older society, looking at the Greek mythology, looking at the ancient Rome, looking at the Egyptians, and what they used to dress and wear, and there was quite a lot of similarities between male and female and what they wore. Yeah. And then now it's almost in the society that we're working in now that's all of a sudden, skirts and dresses are feminine and pants and shirts are masculine. But why?
How on earth have we come into a world where your clothing is what fully defines you? Yeah. Yeah, it's absolutely baffling.
And then even your behaviors, because some of the behaviors that some of the society had back in the earlier would not be considered masculine, but that they were the epitome of masculine back in the time. But now we're looking at it, we're like, that's not masculine.
A lot of the reading that I did, and I'm reading a great book about it at the moment, and I'm sure I'll talk about it in like later episodes, but it's the idea of what females are meant to be is developed upon what males thought females should be, and it's part of control. If you write down 5 feminine characteristics, it's generally, what would you say for your 5 feminine characteristics?
So based on society and based on stereotypes, because being a media teacher, we look at stereotypes. And
you're the worst person to ask.
Yeah, we look at, but we look at stereotypes and we say, okay, we know these aren't true now. You know, I always preface this, we know that these aren't the norm.
That's
but
the question.
Let me get to my question, let me get to it. But I said based on stereotypes, so based on human beings, if we say someone's feminine, what do we think? And the answers I get are, girly, wears pink, wears dresses, likes dolls, likes makeup, that kind of stuff. And then when we look at the masculinity, we look, sporty, muscular. And this is coming from the students, and that's just based on what they've been brought up and what they see in society. And I say, think about movies, think about, what you see on TV and that kind of stuff. And I do this with my 12-year-olds, my 11, 12-year-olds.
Yeah.
And they come out with those kind of answers.
And if you think about how that carries on to adulthood, the characteristics that are generally, again, given to women is nurturing, polite. They're all these attributes that are like things that can be controlled. Because if you think about the juxtaposition between what men get characterized, and it's like bold, assertive, strong, adventurous, all that great kind of stuff.
But I can literally think of several of my feminine friends who have all those characteristics.
Yeah, totally. As they should do, because if you're literally looking at an individual and you're just like, okay, and us as human beings, we are so complex. We have so many beliefs, we have cultures, we have got experiences, we have like differences in how our body is. We've got so many different things that make us up to who we are, and to bring us down to be like, oh, you have like these small characteristics that you have to abide by.
You have to choose out of these 10 characteristics in the feminine column, choose them. That's all you can do. You can't go into the masculine column at all. And it's ridiculous.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense to me, because I'm just like, there's not one person that I can sit in my mind that sits within this. And I'm like, you're also saying by what females can do, it means you're putting them at a step down from what a male can do. If you look at the differences between the adjectives for males to the adjectives of females, the adjectives for males are so much better. They're the go-getters, they're the ones that rule the world, the ones that have power, the ones move forward, that do great things, whereas the females sit at home.
And they're the housewife. And this actually is a great segue into our next small talk that's going to be about male privilege, and the male privilege that I've experienced having lived life as someone who, the society saw as female, and then transitioning and having those masculine traits, and how I'm treated so much better. And we'll go into small talk about that.
So before we cut into that, because it's great to talk about, and I find it very interesting, looking at like gender in itself. Like, of course, there's always going to be things that we define ourselves by, because it's a little bit easier conversationally to be relating to somebody as like he, she, they, rather than someone who has no pronouns whatsoever, because it's a little bit more, I wouldn't say difficult, but if you can't remember somebody's name, it's a little bit harder to be like,
there might be someone out there who doesn't have pronouns.
So interesting to see where the world is in like 500 years. If this is still even a topic, one can only hope that
it won't be, but you really never know.
Yeah, because really, like we've said in this, it's so based around societal confirmation. I was reading into kind of the United Nations Human Rights Office, because they do have some sections about women, human rights and gender equality. Because it was looking at stereotypes and how stereotypes can actually prevent you from getting access to the correct care, or even just it sometimes can actually prevent you from like basic humane rights, which I thought was really interesting as well. I mean, in Australia, I guess we don't really see it so much, but it states that gender stereotype is a generalized view and preconception about attributes and characteristics, or the roles that are or ought to be possessed by or performed by women and men. A gender stereotype is harmful when it limits women's and men's capacity to develop their personal abilities, pursue their professional careers, and or make choices about their lives. Is that not all stereotypes?
Yeah, the problem with stereotypes is it limits you as a human being. The everything, everywhere, all at once speech that I showed you today, his eyes weren't small enough and he didn't talk with enough of an Asian accent, even though he is Asian, and saying that he was never going to make it in a blockbuster film.
Yeah.
And all those kind of things, because of this, because you don't fit into the stereotype of what I believe you should be. Even though he is Asian and, there's white Hollywood people telling him that he doesn't fit into the stereotype, he's never going to make it. How dare you put that stereotype on someone else and say you're not going to make it because you don't fit my stereotype of who I think you should be?
Absolutely. Also, there's something I want to chat about is people who have different pronouns like she, they, or anything that incorporates they as well as a different pronoun like
and there's like Z, and there's all these new ones coming out that I'm not even fully aware of, and I'm learning about them still. And yeah, there's quite some interesting ones. So obviously I go by he, him, where your pronouns are
she, they.
They.
She, her.
I was like, that's
she,
the first
her.
time I've heard that.
Yeah. My pronouns are she, her.
Mm-hmm.
To be honest, I mean, it doesn't bother me when people call me they. It's not something I would outwardly be like, my pronouns are she, they, but like it doesn't bother me being called they.
And there's some people who just can't get around their head around it. They just don't believe in it and they get quite upset about it.
Yeah. Some people, and I was thinking about this because I have a comedian that I follow. I can't remember her name at the moment, but she is non-binary, but she also has she as her pronoun as well. So it's like she, they.
Yeah, and there are some non-binary people who don't go by they. They still go by their pronoun that was given to them at birth and that's put upon them, but they don't feel like they fully fit into that label of he or she.
Gender is fluid as well. So as individuals, as a human person in itself, we're different from day to day. And I'm sure we've all felt it, and we've had some times in our lives, I mean, maybe you haven't had this kind of diversity. I kind of feel sad if you haven't, but anyway, because it's a lot of fun in the questioning your times of life. But it's that whole thing of like, when I was a lot younger, I was very much a tomboy. 100%. And I think at that time, gender binary or gender pronouns, just general pronouns, had been around at the time. I may have identified more with they than she. And it's that fluidity of like, we are so different in what our stories are throughout our lives, depending on like what we're going through. We may feel more masculine at the time. We may feel ourselves to be different in some sort of way. And I know that in how I've been, it's a huge fluidity. It's never going to be the same from day to day. And sometimes how you feel in yourself may not sit specifically with being a certain pronoun. Hence why some people define themselves as having they, and some people just sit within the they space.
And it's completely natural for someone to go, hey, I'm a he, and then a few months down the track be, actually, I am feeling like a they, and have the opportunity to change their pronouns.
Yeah.
Without being attacked. Because I know when Demi Lovato started identifying as they, and then she went back to she.
Yeah.
And there was uproar. It's like, well, she tried it, and she realised that she was more of a she.
Yeah, it changes. And I'm very much in the space of asking pronouns, because when you introduce yourself these days, and I know some of the older generation find it a little bit more difficult. I mean, it's definitely part of our practice at work these days, asking people how they want to be defined as. It's like introducing yourself to somebody. It should be part of that as well. It'll be like, hi, my name is Katie and my pronouns are she, her.
Yeah.
Not hard.
No, I think I have it in my Instagram, and there's a few people at work who have it in their emails as well, and that kind of thing. And it's a general practice that I'll ask someone their pronouns, or what I would do instead is like, hey, my name is Archie, my pronouns are he, him. And it just normalizes pronouns.
Yeah, it does. Even more than asking for it. That's asking for it. That sounds weird.
Yeah.
It's putting it out there first, is like, again, like that olive branch, and being like, look, we can talk about it if you want to talk about it, or you don't have to say that if you don't want to say that.
Yeah, and it's showing someone who may be non-binary or queer or on the LGBTQIA plus rainbow that you're a safe person to talk to. These conversations are going to be so different in a year's time, 10 years' time, 20 years' time. And so it's something that I would love to say that I have all the answers right now, or that we have all the answers for you guys listening at home, but we don't. And this episode is a little bit different. It's a bit more, we're having a bit more of a conversation, and because we don't know the answers. With other stuff, it's been our personal stories, or we've been able to give a bit more of ourselves. So this one might come off a little bit different. And I know Katie was like, oh, I'm not liking this episode, but it's a different episode because it's something that we don't have all the answers to.
Yeah. And I guess also in that way is that, why does it matter? I feel like as human beings, to understand things, we have to group things in boxes with other things.
why do we have to make it so simple? We are an advanced human race. Why do we have to make things and keep it so simple? If you're looking at cells and organisms and all this other, they're so complicated. Why do we have to make ourselves so simple?
We like to try and see a connection between things that make it easier for us to understand things. And I think that that's what has happened with gender and being like, oh, I understand. This is what it's meant to be for females. This is what it's meant to be for males. There's nothing in between. And suddenly there is a whole world that's in between.
Yeah.
And we haven't actually grown in this space just yet.
And then, people get angry that some people have gender conforming surgery and you're like, it's so unnatural. You don't see it out there.
If you think about it, when people are just like, oh, I don't agree with gender conforming surgery. We have been doing gender conforming surgery for every single person, every single baby that's been intersex.
Why is it okay for when someone who's cisgender to have those gender conforming surgeries, but it's not okay for someone who is gender diverse?
Yeah. And also I want to mention that there are all these people and celebrities out there who teeter between the lines of what I would define as female or male in a stereotype, like Bowie, Boy George, Madonna. Oh, I feel like she's teetering through that line as well. There's all
even
these...
Miley Cyrus, Harry Styles.
There's all these people out there that wouldn't sit in this gender binary that certain individuals, Donald Trump, would want us to be sitting in.
Yeah.
It just shows that we are so much more than just one thing. You have to look at a person for everything that they are, not just what's between their legs or not between their legs.
Or how they express themselves.
Yeah, totally.
And if you look at someone like Harry Styles, right? When he was in One Direction, he was quite masculine.
Yeah.
Out on his own, he's allowing his gender expressions to be more fluid and play around with colours and outfits and clothing. And he's never seemed more free and more just happy.
Yeah, it's so true. And he would never have got the following that he had in this day and age.
No.
If he hadn't been that way. We're going to have so many further episodes about this because this is such a growing space. And like we mentioned, we're learning so much.
Yeah, and I feel like by the time we record the next episode, we're probably going to even learn more. We don't have all the answers. So if you disagree with us and you see gender and sex in a different way, let us know. We will share that because we like learning and we don't have all the answers. We're not always right, so we'd love to hear others' perspectives. Send us a email on letsbeperfectlyqueerpod. You can send us a DM on our socials as well, even a voice note. If you'd like to share your story but you feel like, oh, I hate writing, just do that as well and we can make it happen.
Yeah, we'd love to hear from you. It'd be great. But yeah, thank you for listening to this episode. It's been a little bit of a different one. There's been a bit of chatting, a bit of definitions. Like anything, we're all learning.
This one's definitely got a different feel, but this one's a bit more educational and is a bit more conversational and it's a little bit different. And, and people might like this one better. We don't know.
Yeah. So thanks for sticking around. We appreciate it. Rate, review and subscribe to our podcast. We always love hearing from you and those who have reviewed and have rated. We love you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you very much for following along on this journey. I knew I had to say it once this episode.
Yeah, it's your keyword. But yeah, so thank you so much. And I guess I hope that we have been
perfectly queer.